My name is Patricia Mack, and I'm talking about the mihrab in the Mosque Cathedral of Cordoba for Art History 1, May of 2025. There's controversy surrounding the mihrab and its location. Before 1236, when the Catholics conquered Cordoba, the mihrab was in a mosque, and its location was facing in the correct direction. The location of the mihrab is important to the Muslim religion, we'll get onto that shortly, and the Mosque Cathedral is important to Cordoba. However, even though a mihrab is a place where Muslims would worship, no Muslim worship is allowed there today. As background, the cathedral is on the site of an ancient mosque. Most elements of the mosque, including the mihrab, remain in the Mosque Cathedral. There are 4 key points you need to understand about the place and how it impacts the mihrab. The tenets or pillars of the Muslim religion, the location of Cordoba, the history of Cordoba, and the history of the Mosque Cathedral itself. This is an aerial view of the Mosque Cathedral of Cordoba. You can see the raised portion in the center is the cathedral. Everything else surrounding it up until the green space is the mosque, and the green space is a courtyard surrounded by a walkway, and the tower that you see on the far left used to be the minaret and is now the bell tower for the Catholic Church. So as part of the Muslim religion, a mosque is where Muslims gather to worship and pray. And there are 5 pillars of the Muslim religion, but the one that is most important for the mihrab is that it is important to pray 5 times daily towards the Kaaba in Mecca. And the direction of the Kaaba is determined by the Qibla wall, and the mihrab is a niche in that wall. Therefore, the mihrab points towards the Kaaba in Mecca. So Cordoba's location. So Cordoba is in Andalusia in the south of Spain. It's on this map here. It's close to northern Africa, which becomes important later. It's on a river, which allows it to become a port that goes down to the sea, and it is near mountains and agriculture, which provides for source of products to be exported to out, so including minerals, agriculture, and so on. So up until the 13th century, there was a lot of stuff that happened in Cordoba. The Romans arrived. They liked the area because of the river and the valley and all of that. The Visigoths took over from the Romans when the Roman Empire kind of dissolved, and they were there until 711 when the Muslims captured Cordoba, destroyed it, but then they went on to rebuild it. It became a cultural center for the Islamic world, and when it became an emirate, it later grew into a caliphate, and an emirate is a portion of the area that is governmental control. However, caliphate, that emirate rolls into the caliphate, and the caliphate is both a governmental control and a religious control area. And this lasted until 1236 when the Catholic Christians won the conquest of Cordoba through a siege of Cordoba. So the history of the mosque itself, originally in 711, the Muslims rented space in the existing Visigoth church. And then a survivor of the Umayyad dynasty, he comes from Damascus at a time when that dynasty was being pushed out, and he becomes the emir in 756 CE. He eventually builds a mosque on the church site. That includes everything that a mosque would include: the Qibla wall, the mihrab, the minaret, courtyard, the garden, everything. And then he and his descendants continued to expand the mosque 3 more times. And there is a map of those additions that came from our textbook. So here are some images of the mosque. These are pictures that I took in Cordoba over spring break. The horseshoe arches, or the arches with the red and white, were brick initially. The columns were reused from other Roman buildings, and this space was small but grew to be a place where 40,000 people could worship. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see something that looks like Islamic architecture, but is actually something that was built by the Christians, because you can see a picture of, or a sculpture of Christ on the right-hand side. And while it imitated the horseshoe arch, this was in homage almost to the mosque, so that it looked more cohesive. So images of the mihrab. So the mihrab is on the far right. The dome above it is on the far left, and then in the middle you can see how it transitions from the dome down to the top of the mihrab. This was behind a fence, so you could not get very close to this. So you could not see the niche behind the mihrab. You can only get a sense of it. And the top 7 arches above the mihrab, I asked our guide, and he said it represents the 7 days of the week. It could also represent the 7 levels of heaven. I could find nothing that described what those 7 arches represented. So the history of the cathedral and the mihrab. So in 1236, with the Catholic conquest, they converted the mosque to a cathedral. They didn't do much more to that. They didn't have a whole lot of money. In 1390, they covered the mihrab with a chapel, and then they turned around in 1492. There was the Reconquista that ended Islamic rule. That is when they captured Granada, and they no longer were, Islam was no longer part of the controlling area in Spain. And between 1523 and 1607, there was a Renaissance cathedral built in the center of this mosque, and that was a real challenge to do, because they couldn't destroy any of what was around it. The story is that the townspeople who worked on this would not allow them to destroy any of it. I could not find evidence of that, but they did allow this to remain. In 1595, there was a canvas installed that covered more of what was looking like the mosque, so that it looked less like the mosque and more like a cathedral. And then after a period of time, during 1815 to 1818, they were dismantling one of the altars, or the chapels, and they discovered this mihrab, and due to it was, even though it was falling apart at that point, it was still extraordinarily beautiful, and they chose to then start to restore it. So here are some images of the cathedral. When you're in the cathedral, you cannot see the mosque. It is a very odd thing to be in the center of this enormous cathedral and not see anything of the mosque. And the 2 images on the right are from the treasury, a separate section of the cathedral. So currently, the Mosque Cathedral became a World Heritage Site in 1984, and then they expanded it to include areas within the city and the old city and more, because of the fact that it had maintained its cultural and historical significance, had not changed much in that period of time. There was some controversy about, was the mihrab pointing in the right direction, and I found an article that said yes, it is. All of the mosques in that region all pointed the same way, and they were not necessarily in alignment pointing to Mecca, where it says, they were pointing southward, like the emir who came from Damascus. Damascus is north of Mecca, and therefore everything pointed south. No, it was that it was pointing in the same direction as the Kaaba. So the mosque is part of the name, but in the website of the Mosque Cathedral, the mosque portion of it was removed in November of 2014 by Google Maps. And within 3 days, there was 55,000 signatures that said that they wanted it returned. So there was definitely a pushback at that point. However, Muslims are not allowed to pray, and they're harassed when they're visiting. I found a couple articles that talked about how even though it looks like a mosque and there is a mihrab, anybody who looks Muslim, when they come in, guards might follow them. They're going to be very proactive in telling them that they cannot pray. So they can visit, they can talk they can pray silently, but they can't do a Muslim prayer. This is in spite of the fact that Cordoba and this mosque are important to their culture and history for close to 500 years. So this is still a very important location for Muslims. So the Islamic and the Catholic cultures are at odds. There's a survey that said that the Spanish don't think that Islam and Spain are compatible, and yet there is also another thing that says, there's two camps. One that says that Spain is Catholic, and another one that says Spain is diverse and honors also both the diversity Islamic and the Catholic culture. So they are at odds in Spain at the present time. So here's where we end with the controversy regarding the place and my conclusion. So the mihrab is an extraordinary piece of artwork. It is in its historic location, so it is still on the Qibla wall. It is still facing Mecca. It is still restored as it was at the time it was worshipped as a mosque. The entire hypostyle is still there, where people would have gathered. And so here we have elements, almost complete elements of a mosque and the elements of a cathedral. This location is definitely, when you get to the cathedral portion of it, you can tell that this is definitely a cathedral, and there are chapels, there are other areas that are definitely Catholic. The Catholic Church has declared the entire space as a cathedral only. It won't recognize anything but it being a Catholic place. The World Heritage Site tends to include both. It highlights the mosque and the name. It also recognizes more of the area, and the name of it is the Mosque Cathedral. The mihrab and the Qibla wall, it's now part of a Catholic building. So this is the confusion and the controversy. So the mihrab, it's a historic treasure. It's not going to be moved, and it represents where Muslims can honor their cultural but not their religious heritage.